I believe everyone would agree that our society has become more divisive than ever before in our lifetime. What has occurred in the last few years is just greater than anything we've ever seen before. And we've always had divisions, have always had differences in beliefs, we've had party lines and denominations, we've always had that. Fortunately, over the past 3 decades or so, there's been a decline in the animosity between denominations. That's been a good thing. However, in the realm of political thinking about issues within society, there has been an increase in the acrimony expressed by opposing groups. We've witnessed physical attacks on people for wearing a certain kind of ball cap. We've witnessed physical attacks on people for not having a piece of cloth over their face. People who have been lifelong friends suddenly find themselves in a persona non grata status with friends and even family. Being ostracized from the family, something that was formerly limited to the Amish and the Muslims, has now become commonplace in our society. The current dividing line right now, or at least this week, as it changes so much, the current dividing line is your opinion over Mr. Putin, the leader of Russia who has invaded Ukraine. Almost everyone has experienced this divisive attitude at one level or another over any one of these issues or other issues that I've mentioned. I don't see that there's any way we can be happy with this situation in our society. I don't think it's anything we can be comfortable with. Is this the way it's supposed to be? Will it always be this way? I think it will continue to be this way for as long as we, as a society, continue to view anyone as the other. We seem to have grown comfortable with an us versus them mentality. So I want to begin with our scripture lesson from this morning in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 11, where he says, "Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all." Now Paul is pointing to the things that people used to divide themselves back in his time. If he were writing today, he would say there is neither black nor white, conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican. And we'd probably look at that and say he was out of touch with reality. For of course, those groups exist. The groups he spoke of from his day also existed. There definitely were then, and there definitely are now, various groups, different religions, different economic classes, different parts of the world where culture is different. So what was Paul getting at? What was he trying to say? Let's look at this verse from a different translation. In this new life, it doesn't matter if you are a Jew or a Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbaric, uncivilized, slave or free. Christ is all that matters, and he lives in all of us. He is talking about how we should view things from a new and different perspective, because we should have a different worldview now in the Lord than we had before. As a believer, we should not be subject to the world's way of thinking in anything. We are not of those who make distinctions between one another. Now, Paul also said this in a different way in another passage. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 16, he said, "From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh. Even though we once regarded Christ according to the flesh, we regard him thus no longer. Regarding Christ or anyone according to the flesh causes us to make distinctions in our thinking. It's just an automatic when we do it that way, when that's our basis from which we come. Those distinctions are based on our own fleshly value judgments. We each have a value system. Now, those value judgments will inevitably lead to separation. Better than, less than, however you view things. And separation leads to division. And division leads to war. Now, while it may not be a major war between countries, any animosity between two people is a war. And war is what we are seeing in our society today. Politically and sociologically, we know that this sharp, divisive attitude is caused by a lack of understanding. Now, it's up to you and me, and any other believer who may hear and understand what I'm saying this morning. It's up to us that we are to stem the tide of this division in our society. Now, that probably hits you pretty hard, sounding like that's a pretty tall order. And it is. It's a tall order when you consider yourself and the vastness of society, but it is not so tall if you apply the principle of eating an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. One bite at a time. And that's what Paul was saying in the context of the verse that I've quoted. Let's go all the way back to verse 8 where he says, "But now you must put them all away. Anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth." Now notice that the first four, anger, wrath, malice, and slander, are each directed at others. It's directed at them. These are the result of a separation and division from the other, at least in the moment. At least in the moment. May not be overall, but at least when it's happening, it's divisive. So Paul then goes on with how we can slow that divisiveness between us, at least as far as we are concerned, what we can do. He says, "Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices." Question: have you put off the old self? Have you put away that part of who you were that made distinctions and judged others as being somewhat less than? In another place, Paul tells us to put off the old man, the old life, but here he says we already have. He says it's a done deal. It is a statement of fact. You have put off the old self and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. There's a process going on, and you need to join in and participate it with your consciousness, being aware of it. He says this as a matter of fact. You have put on the new self. And that new self is being constantly renewed in knowledge after the image of that new self's creator, the one who created you. Now, growth comes from the constant renewal in knowledge. What we know changes as we grow. Is that easy enough to assimilate? For instance, I graduated high school in 1965 when there were only 98 elements on the periodic table in chemistry. Today, there are 118 elements in the periodic table in chemistry. That's 20 more than when I graduated. Fortunately, the ones I recall, gold, mercury, water, hydrogen, oxygen, those that I recall are still there. They haven't gotten rid of them like they did with the planets. When I graduated, there were 9 planets. And since then, there's dropped down to 8, increased to 10, brought one of them back, threw another one out. Because knowledge changes. As we grow, we change. The point, though, is that if we are being renewed in knowledge, which is bringing us to be more like Christ, then we should also be changing. And as I was meditating on that this morning, I realized that a lot of people will say, I'm too old to change. And that's just plumb wrong. I've probably told you before, there's the common saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But I learned from experience that probably says more about the teacher than it does the dog. Okay? Yes, we can change. We should always be changing. We should be changing the things we say. We should be changing the things we do. We should be changing the things we think about. Those that are attending the Thursday afternoon Bible study are learning that thinking is also something that we can control. We're going to keep this change going until we have the full mind of Christ. Now, Jesus said something that pertains to this idea of division and what we can do about it. He said in his Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Now, peacemaking is what we're seeing as a need to stop the division. There was a pistol known as the Colt 45, and for a time it was called the Peacemaker. But that's not what Jesus meant. It's not what he was referring to. He did not talk so much about those who could stop a fight through an intervention, whether lethal or otherwise. He was talking about those who by their very presence, the presence of their being, bring peace to a situation. They are peacemakers. Peacemakers are those who do not get entangled in the divisive nature of our world. They're able to remain aloof from all the propaganda and news stories and fear predictions from the preachers of doom. They're able to remain aloof from it. They're able to help calm the fears of those who do tend to get distracted by all those things, by all the noise. They're able to calm those fears. I was listening to a chaplain recount an experience he had in Iraq. He was in the back of one of those transports, I don't know what you call them, where they were heading out into the battle area. And the soldier sitting next to him said, "Chaplain, I'm glad you're here today." The chaplain, of course, appreciated the comment because he knows that's his job. That's his reason for being there, is to bring comfort to the soldiers. But then he asked the soldier, "Why are you glad that I am here?" The soldier said, "I just feel safer having you present with us." That's a peacemaker. Now we can look at it and say it was because of the chaplain's emblem on his uniform, probably little black crosses on, if they were wearing camouflage that day, which I'm sure they were. But being a peacemaker, by your very presence, can you calm the fears of those who are not calm? So let's return to our original verse to see one last thing about getting rid of this us versus them mentality. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. It is not until we're able to see the truth of this statement, that Christ is all and in all, the one I've highlighted for you, that we'll then be able to get rid of our divisive thinking. Christ is all and in all. Now, we don't truly believe that as a society. Just consider all the struggles we have gone through in our own country since Jefferson penned the words where he said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The black man has had to struggle to even be recognized as human, let alone be equal. Women have had to struggle to even be recognized as human, let alone equal. And we're still struggling for some of those areas of equality. But this truth, that Christ is all and in all, has so penetrated my heart in the last couple of years that I can no longer view anyone as worse or better than I. It's just, it is something that has happened to me. It's not a decision I made. It's something that happened. The more I've come to understand the love of God and Christ and His presence. The result for me has been that I am grieved when I hear conversations that degenerate into an us versus them mentality. And I hear it. I hear it among my pastor friends as they begin to talk about other churches or people's beliefs. I hear it among my friends concerning the political landscape. And I'm just not comfortable with it anymore. Yes, we're going to have differences of opinions. I'm not saying that we're going to get rid of those. We're going to have differences of opinions about all manner of things, but there is no reason to view the other side as stupid or out of touch or mean or ignorant or any other negative type. We don't need to view that or view them that way. When we do, we are not able to love as Jesus loved, which is what we are called to do by the grace of God. So let us make love our aim, our goal. Make it your purpose, your intention. Ask the Lord to increase the size of your love bucket and go out and pour love on people, if you will. There's more than enough to go around, but not enough is being shared these days. Paul writes in Corinthians, so now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. But the greatest of these is love. So it's good that you have faith. It's good that you have hope. But most importantly, you should have love. So I ask you this week, let this week provide you an opportunity. Look for an opportunity to love in a way that you have never experienced before. Ask the Lord to give you that opportunity. And may your heart be enlarged to a place of resistance against any form of us versus them thinking. Amen.